Okay, we're going to get started here. So my name is Said Akhtar. I'm a program manager on the B2C team. And this is Vinu. I'll let her introduce herself.
I was going to do the introduction later, but I'm Vinu, program manager from the B2C team.
Okay, and so what we're talking about here is branding the experience within customizing the experience of the end users that go through sign-up flows and various other experiences with the B2C product while they're basically flowing from the application into the B2C service and then back into their application. So at the end of this course, you should be familiar with the ways to customize and localize the end user experiences. We're going to give you a lot of tips and tricks on how to optimize the experience in terms of performance, marketing campaigns, etc. This is extremely demo heavy. We do not have any labs in this course. We do have some things that we'll follow up with in terms of blog posts and samples that we'll make available. And then we also have a session 12 to 1 today during lunch where we can help you get a lot of these demos working with one-on-one help. So if there's a particular demo that you see and you're like, okay, this is what I need, just come find us and we'll help you with it. So agenda, we have a bunch of stuff on UI customization. This is just intro level stuff. And then we jump into a bunch of demos with dynamic content for having a campaign parameter. We have a demo of Keep Me Signed In. We have some performance demos. And then we talk a little bit about what's coming in the future. So what's available for customization within B2C? So all of the sign up pages, sign in pages, profile edit, password reset pages, pixel perfect control. So what does that mean? Well, we allow you to upload your own HTML and CSS, and that allows you to theme essentially all of the Chrome around the couple of fields that Microsoft inserts. There is a username, password, and a button essentially that we insert, but all of those ID tags are well known, and that allows you in CSS to apply whatever themes or controls that you want to customize that experience. And then we also have localized strings that we provide localized versions for in many different languages, but you can override any of those strings and use your own strings instead. We have emails that are sent. This is during verification. When you're verifying your identity, those can all be branded. And really the goal, like the North Star of what we're aiming for, is that an end user shouldn't be able to tell the difference between an application and the identity service that you're using as an implementation detail, right? It should be just one seamless experience to them. That's going to maximize your conversion rates for people that are trying to get through the sign-up experience, trying to get through the sign-in experience, and so on and so forth. So this is the first demo. How many in this room have branded something in B2C? So it seems like most of you. I'm just going to show you really quick what it looks like in the portal. So I've got a tenant, a B2C tenant here, and how do I get here? So all of the branding occurs at a policy level. So I have a sign-in, sign-up policy here that I've clicked edit on. And then it brings up this edit policy blade. And one of the options here is page UI customization. And there are many different pages. So at some point, you may have a social account or a local account chooser up front, and then you need to actually log in. You may have an error page that you want to customize, but it starts with the unified sign-in, sign-up. And once you select unified sign-up or sign-in, you turn on page customization, and then you provide a URL to your content. This can be a URL to static content that exists on Azure Blob Storage. It could also be a URL to a dynamic PHP server, Node.js server, ASP.NET server that basically is serving dynamic content based on parameters that you're receiving from B2C, and we have some demos of that later on. So you can see what this looks like. So once we've basically made this customization and I click Run Now, you can see that everything here is themed based on content that we've provided from our server. So how does it work? You provide an anchor element within your content pages, and then we have client-side JavaScript that essentially pulls the piece that we need to embed into your content, which includes a username field, a password field, and we kind of merge all of this together on the client side and then display that to the end user. So if I were to show you this example here and go look at the source code of the HTML page that's on, so this is just a static page that I have hosted on Blob Storage. And notice that there's no username field, password field. All of those are coming from the B2C service. But there is this anchor element, which is this div tag, and this essentially tells B2C where to insert the content. So you essentially control all the Chrome, the CSS, the theme around this content, and then we insert the necessary fields into this div tag. So the advantage of doing it this way is, rather than just having some brand where you control this image and you control, this, piece of text, our North Star goal is to allow you to fully customize the entire experience. So now Vinu's going to talk a little bit about multi-language support, and then she's got some great demos for you guys.
So we looked at UI customization, but I want to go more into the language support that we have. So we went generally available in Europe a few months ago. Along with that, several languages, not only in Europe, but all across the world. 30 plus languages and its variants are available in B2C, just off the shelf. We also have right to left languages like Arabic on the roadmap. So if you've attended Parag's session yesterday, we allow you to override the strings, not only in the basic policy, but also in the custom policy. If you've missed Parag's session yesterday, I strongly recommend you to go over the session recording. So, so the way you would inject a language into your policy to show up in the login pages is in your policy, you can pick up the language of your choice and you can just run now. So this is how your UI locales parameter would be injected to your login page. I'll show you an example of how a fully localized and customized login experience looks like. So this is in French. So this is an example of a fully customized, like how Saeed told us earlier, and localized in French login experience. So going back to this again, so the fallback logic of which language will be picked up in your login page is first the UI locales parameter. Say you don't have a UI locales parameter, it'll look at the browser user agent and run that language. But also that browser user agent language should be in the supported list of 30 languages that we provide. If that is not there, it defaults to the default policy from your policy itself. So moving on, not only we allow you to customize the login pages, but we also allow you to customize the verification emails that we send from B2C. So this is an example of a fully customized email verification. So if you notice, you can change the header that matches up with your logo. So in this Contoso, you can see I've changed it to blue, and this comes from the Contoso company. And also the sincerely, it by default picks up the application name, which is Contoso here. Not only you can customize your email verification, but you can also completely localize it. So if you run your policy with French as UI locales, it automatically sends verification emails only in French. So moving on, so that was all about localization and customization. I want to speak a little bit about how you can reuse your existing policies, but generate dynamic content based on the query string parameter that you pass to your login URL. So for example, yesterday I logged on to my Chase account, and because I logged on from Seattle, the backdrop for my Chase account was beautiful skyline of Seattle. For example, like some of your sports platform might ask, we have different favorite players from different countries, and we want to show their faces in a particular geographical location. So I'm just quickly going to show you a demo of how it looks like, and then after the demo, I'll walk into the details of how we've implemented this. So this is our fictitious coffee company. So this is how the login experience looks like. Now this is, any day if you come to the coffee company, this is how the experience looks like. But just on Christmas Day, we've introduced a new coffee. So I want that coffee to be the backdrop of my login experience. So all I'm doing is if you notice here, there is a campaign ID here. So all I'm really doing is I'm changing the campaign ID. And then it's changed the backdrop of my login experience. So I'll walk you into the details of how we did that. So on Christmas days, we ran a campaign ID of CR5 to load the backdrop of red coffee cups. And on all the other days, we've showed the coffee beans with the campaign ID of CR6. So there are two parts to this implementation. So first part is you need to send that extra query string parameter to your login URL. And the way that you would send this, you would define a content definition. Here we've defined a content definition parameter of campaign ID. So this allows you to send an extra query string parameter in your login URL. Now the second part to this is you need to host. So taking a step back, how all of this works is B2C at the end of the day just expects HTMLs, right? So, so you can have a PHP or a ASP server, server-side scripted scripts that based on the campaign ID will generate different HTMLs. So in this example, there are two different HTMLs just based on the campaign ID. It was dynamically generating those HTMLs. So moving on to the next part of our presentation. I'll give you a moment to read about accessibility from Satya's words. So we take accessibility very seriously in Microsoft, right from the design phase to production. We've also tested B2C against several accessibility tools. So we've ensured that B2C is strongly accessible to everyone. Any questions so far? So moving on to the next session, have any of you? Yeah, go ahead.
Before we do that, just querying about the seamless experience, right? So in the web world, that makes a lot of sense to me. You can do quite a bit to embed the login and the sign-in experience into the apps. The native world's a little different. I've got a customer at the moment who's struggling with this. So from a native application, we have to call out to B2C for the login and sign-up experience. And social identity providers preventing us from doing that in embedded browsers. So that whole seamless approach just doesn't work, right? We basically have to move out to a system browser, do all the identity pieces, and then come back to that. So the UX guys are really putting pressure on us, saying, okay, to make that really UX driven, if you like, we need a lot more control over that page. So I mean, that would discuss things about the ability to run JavaScript on the page, that sort of thing. But I just wonder, back to that design goal or design principle of being seamless, whether that still holds in those two worlds, one being web, one being native.
Okay, so I'm
So
just going
let me repeat the question. So the question I think is around how do I get native experiences? And was the question also specifically around social, like Facebook login?
Well, just for consistency, we can't sort of have two different plays, right? So for our logging experience, we're going to have to push out to the system browser.
So
That, to enable the user to then do local or social signing.
so you want a seamless native experience?
I'm
That's
just wondering, yeah, what's the plan for managing those two scenarios without
Yeah, so I can speak to some of this. So there's a couple trade-offs that we've made so far, but we're open to feedback. And that is we've tried to alleviate the burden of handling passwords and the security associated with that from the application developer. So as a result of trying to do that, the system web browser is the easiest way for us to essentially have all of the password and information that's securely needs to be handled securely passed from the mobile device to our service and then back into application control, right? I think there's probably other ways that we could, and so let me get back to the other native experiences that you may want to achieve. You may also want to achieve, hey, I want to edit my profile, I want to sign out, I want to do all those things. I think, through Graph API, you should be able to, get at all the information that is associated with that user and basically keep them in that native experience the entire time. I think it's just during the sign-in experience that you're going to be using the system web browser. So the system web browser gives us this way of handling credentials securely. It also gives us a way to enable single sign-on across multiple applications. So if you did have a scenario where you had app A, app B, app C all on the device, by going to the system web browser and signing in once, you do have a cookie that's written that would be sent by the system web browser to B2C for the other applications as well, and you would be signed in. So you'd get a flash of a screen, oh, you're already signed in, you get a token back, right? So there's some benefits to going that route, but I think perhaps your feedback is around, hey, if I want to sign in via Facebook, I would rather sign in using the Facebook app rather than showing a UI in a system web browser and then clicking Facebook. Is it specific to that, or?
No, it was just more around about the approach, right? So I just want to make sure that we're not just putting all our eggs into the seamless web experience, that we've got native apps out there consuming the product, and that experience is not seamless. We should also make it the best experience that we can.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is our goal to make that. I mean, we're not focused just on web. We are also focused on mobile. We have, an investment in many different, OpenID Connect uh, libraries on the mobile device on Android and iOS and whatnot. But yeah, I'm certainly open to hear more feedback about what you would like to achieve on the mobile device, and then we can try and figure out what's the best path. Do you have anything to add, Pinu? Or?
I was just going to say, I think ROPC is what you're looking for. Resource owner password credential flow for sign-in experience. We are investigating on that. We don't have a timeline right now, but we are investigating and we are actively working on ROPC as well. So when ROPC is out, you would have a seamless sign-in experience in native devices.
Yeah, there'll be a trade-off to that. The trade-off is that, again, your application will be responsible for handling credentials. You'll have to go through your own security review as to, are we doing everything that we need to safeguard those credentials? So there'll be a trade-off.
So just like ROPC, Keep Me Signed In also comes with a lot of security constructs. So that's why when we started off with B2C, we didn't invest in Keep Me Signed In, but we had a lot of customers coming up to us and asking, can you implement Keep Me Signed In experience? So we did, and we'd like to show you a demo on that. So first I'll walk through the demo, and after that I'll show you the implementation details. So now you can see a new Keep Me Signed In with a checkbox here. So I'm going to enter my credentials. So I say Keep Me Signed In. I'm just going to copy the URL so that I can show you. So I say signed in. I can't see clearly, I'm just going to flip back here. I think my credentials were probably wrong. So I signed in using Keep Me Signed In experience, and it takes me to the welcome page. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm closing the browser, and I'll open a new browser. I think I've lost the... So I'm copy pasting the login page. And you can see that it directly took me to the welcome to Contoso coffee shop without asking me to sign in. So if I went incognito and I tried to go to the sign in page, it should prompt me to sign in this time. So it's asking me to sign in now. So how this whole experience works is, the Keep Me Signed In value is stored in a persistent cookie, and I'll show you the implementation details now. And also you can see that. So how this works is the keep me sign in settings are stored in a persistent cookie in your web browser. So these are the different knobs that we allow you to tweak for the keep me signed in. So the first one is the keep alive in days. So if you, how many ever days in this example, it's 14 days. So if you've set it to 14 days, then your application will never ask you to sign in for the next 14 days. You can also have you can also have a session expiry type. It can be absolute or it can be rolling. So if it is absolute, it'll expire. Your keep me signed in session would expire in 14 days, no matter how many times you've silently logged in. But if it's rolling, every time you log in, your keep me signed in session would be extended to another 14 days. So we recommend you to keep this value, the keep alive in days value low if you choose rolling. Also by default, the keep alive in days is 0. So if you don't specify anything, the default value is 0, and you won't see any keep me signed in experience in your login pages. Any questions on keep me signed in?
So is there any maximum time for the keep live days?
I'll have to check on that. I'm not sure.
We have a couple of customers that really want, once you log in, they don't ever want to see that screen again.
Okay,
They
yeah.
log in, I mean, just
Yeah. Yeah, but you should also be careful. You should recommend the end users not to log on a public computer. Yeah. And also one more thing I want to call out that you might also, depending on the kind of application, say you change your password on one device, you have to decide if you want if the user's logged on to another device, you want to make a decision if you want to make them change the password in the next device. So for that, you would have to revoke the refresh tokens that's already existing out there. Yeah.
So in browser-based sign-on like this, the user changes their password, as B2C invalidating that cookie that's still working with this, that when the password change happens.
So you have to revoke the refresh token right after you go through your password change. Well, the question was if B2C flushes the cookie out when the password is changed on another device. So the answer is right after you finish your password change policy, your application needs to revoke the refresh tokens, all the refresh tokens that was ever sent out. Yeah. Go ahead. The question is if this is a default behavior to revoke the refresh tokens. So that is not a default behavior, but you can add it in like right after the. So there's an API that you can use to revoke the refresh token. I think John's session yesterday covered how to do that. So right after the password change policy, you can call the API to revoke the refresh token. Yeah, Saeed is going to talk about the performance tips on your.
Okay, so I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a couple demos where when we show the themed UI, there's just a slight flicker of, you see this, it's starting to render username, password field, and then all of a sudden it's themed. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the performance tips of, this is not always like the ideal situation of how you want to structure HTML, but if you are focused on trying to improve the performance and user experience, these are some tips that you could use to try and achieve a little faster experience. So inlining and minifying your CSS, avoiding large images, consider using like inline SVG, and then hosting your content on a CDN. So I wanted to show a demo of this. And I'm going to open up an incognito window here. And we're going to Yeah, it is really hard to see if you're not watching for it. So let me see if I can get it to happen one more time. If as soon as I open that URL, there is just a really fast flash, and it basically starts to render it with the username and password field, and then all of a sudden it's gone, and you see the themed UI experience. Yeah, makes sense. I can make a new incognito. Let me just copy the URL so that I don't have to type it again. So just one more time. Here it is. Watch it, and you'll have to pay really close attention. So right as it starts to load here, you see a slight flash of where you see the username field, the password field with no theme involved. So if I look at the source, here's essentially what's happening on this page is I've got some HTML content that is merged on the client here. If I go into the portal and I'm looking at the policy, so if I go into perf demo slow policy and I edit this guy and I go into page UI customization, unified, and I look at this URI here, I copy this, and I'm going to paste it into a web browser, and we're going to view the source of this. Here's that tag. This is our anchor of where content is going to be inserted. And notice that I've got a couple of links here. One link is to load Bootstrap CSS, and another is to load another CSS file that I've created. When the page is being loaded and it's merging the content in the client JavaScript, it's going out to these URLs and pulling additional content down into the page. There is this slight delay of it thinks, hey, I've got the HTML, this HTML, and I'm ready to display the page, but in fact it doesn't have the CSS files. And so that CSS needs to be pulled down, and then all of a sudden you see the themed UI. So the alternative, I'm going to show you this other policy where we've done something slightly different, which is this perf demo fast policy. So I'm going to edit this one again, go into page UI customization, open up the unified sign up, sign in, and I'm going to look at this page that I have here and view source on it. And there's one thing that I've done differently here, which is I've inlined all the CSS, and I ran it through the CSS minify tool. If you search on the web, you can find many of these CSS minify tools. But I've minified the CSS and I've inlined it. It does make it less readable. I'll definitely say this is not the most readable form of your content. But if we go and we do a run now on this, and I'm going to copy this URL and use a incognito window so that we don't have any caching going on. And I paste this URL. Let me make just sure that it's using the correct policy. So yeah, so this is the perf demo fast, and if I hit enter, it's almost immediately loads with the branded content. You don't get this like quick flash of the previous content versus this content. So we have kind of a wrap up of all the tips that we have here. Oh, sorry. Let's talk about what's coming soon. So we've talked about all the ways that you can brand the UI experience. We've talked about HTML and CSS. We've talked about branding emails. Another common ask that we get is, I need control over the JavaScript. So one thing that you'll notice is in all the B2C pages, when they're loading here, that they're based off of login.microsoftonline.com. That's the same URL that we use for all of Microsoft's production services. MSA, go ahead.
Sorry, but I have a question on the provider side.
Sure.
So the HTML that was hosted, if it was hosted on a storage space for Azure, would it be because I understood that Azure uses CDN as well.
Yeah, so the question is, does it matter where the content is hosted? Do you get any performance benefit from hosting the content on Azure? The content is merged on the client. So it's actually client-side JavaScript that's going out and hitting that URL to pull down additional content. So there's no server-side to server-side, B2C server calling your server directly. It is the client that's reaching out and calling your service. So the optimal performance is just to have that content as close as possible to the client that you're actually serving. So, if it's static content, CDNs are great for getting, that content edge cached as close as possible to your clients. The Azure storage system does have a CDN that you can enable relatively easily on blob storage. There are other, lots of other CDN offerings out there as well. If it's dynamic content, hey, I'm taking this URI, maybe I'm looking at the UI locales parameter, or I'm looking at some campaign ID parameter, and I need to dynamically create content. There's probably performance tips which are specific to that language, like performance tips specific to Node, specific to ASP.NET, specific to PHP, that you'd want to employ to make sure that that page renders as quickly as possible and is served to the client as quickly as possible. And maybe there's even edge caching that you can do, pre-generating content or that sort of thing. Did I answer your question, Willa?
So here's like for static content, you can take advantage of CDN.
Yeah, for static content, I think it's pretty easy to put it on blob storage, turn on CDN, have it edge cached, so that the clients are going to have really quick access to that file. So what I was going to say is all of our login, sign in, sign up experiences occur on this URL today, login.microsoftonline. That's the same URL that we use for Microsoft production services, and so therefore we cannot allow you to run JavaScript on that domain. But we do have some roadmap for having branded domains. The simplest one is if you go to Azure websites and you create a Azure website today, you get mysite.azurewebsites.net essentially. And so being able to give each tenant its own subdomain would allow us to give you full control to run your JavaScript within that subdomain, so that there's no security concern across Microsoft services and your services. And then the next thing is we have MSA has started this path and will continue this path of trying to improve conversion rates and sign up experiences. And there's some benefits that this would bring to B2C. So I'd love to give you this demo and then get your feedback on if this is something that you would like to see in our B2C services. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open a browser here and I'm going to go to login.live.com. So notice that there's no password field here. So this experience has multiple pages to it. The first one is as simple as possible. It's what is your email, your phone number, essentially what is your username, right? This reduces cognitive load on the end user. So imagine you go to a site and you're thinking, did I sign up for the site? I don't remember. So do I type my username and guess a password? Or do I click forgot password first? If you ask them for a sign in and they type a username and they have not signed up for the service yet, we can basically push them down the flow of signing up for the service if they need to. And if they don't need to, then we can basically prompt them for the username, for the password. The other scenario where this becomes very useful is imagine that you've set up federation for, you have a corporate customer and you've set up federation to their employee directory. Now, one of these employees comes to your application and types in their username, and they see the username and the password field there, and they get this uncomfortable feeling of, is it safe for me to enter my corporate credentials into this page? Like, this isn't owned by my company directly. And one of the advantages of this is you can type your email, realize, oh, I need to federate to Contoso because they typed a Contoso email address, and then push them into, basically redirect to the federated identity provider. And then they see the Contoso, branded login page. They see the URL of, oh, this is Contoso's corporate, login page. And all of these kind of experience things, we've found through experimentation on MSA that this does improve conversion rates of sign up, and improves conversion rates of sign in, and that we've gotten, with individuals and testing this with individuals and getting their feedback, that they get the impression that this is simpler, it's easier to understand, I know exactly what's going on. So we're looking to make available these types of flows as built-in policies so that you'd be able to create a sign-up, sign-in experience that kind of models after this behavior in MSA. If this is interesting to you, table talks at 12 to 1, like we'd love to hear your feedback on that. If there's pitfalls and reasons where you think this is a bad idea, we'd love to hear that feedback as well. It would be optional, so we're not going to force anything down your throat or anything to that effect. This is just, we're trying to take the best practices from what we've learned from Microsoft services and then bring them to you. Question?
Wouldn't that be great? This is one step in the user journey. It's like multiple bonds, just to email address pass whatever. So email supplied here, we're now going to our next registration step, which is on the IDP that we take a username and send that off to any tool as well. So it's not just a email box, it's a opportunity.
Yes, sorry, let me try and repeat your question. So when they type a username here, are you going to get access to that in the orchestration steps to do a conditional fork to say, if the subdomain, or sorry, the domain suffix is contoso.com, I want to do something different in my custom policy than if it were Microsoft.com or Boeing.com or whatever it may be, right? Yeah, I think that's a very interesting scenario, and that's exactly the sort of thing that we'd want to support in terms of simplifying the experience based on who the customer is, right? Makes sense. So this is a summary. we're just trying to bring it all back. When you're hosting your content, one of the biggest, gotchas is that the content server needs to be enabled for cores. There is a site, if you're struggling with this at all, there is a site that I have that talks about all the different technologies, Node.js and ASP.NET and all these other servers, and how you go about enabling cores for each of these. And then in our documentation, we have a tool that you can basically run this command line tool, and it will enable Azure Blob Storage for cores. So if you're struggling with this at all, let me know. We can work through this quickly. Absolute URLs. So one thing in that content is when I minified it and embedded it all within my page, previously I had these relative URLs where I was, pulling in, an image file or some other fonts that I needed within my page, and they were all using relative URLs. Well, when I minify them and bring them into my page, I had to make all of those, absolute URLs, just so that it's pulling the correct content. This is just going to make sure that there's no broken links or any trouble trying to merge all the content on the client-side JavaScript. HTTPS, always a best practice. Making sure that your HTML is compliant and accessible. There are a number of screen readers that we've done work on B2C to try and make sure that these screen readers work well with B2C. But that's something that you should be testing for as well as you brand and customize your UX to make sure that accessibility is working for your site. Simplifying the sign-up process. We've seen this is just a best practice in terms of really complex sign-up experiences of asking for too much information during the sign-up process really can turn users away. They see something that looks intimidating and they go, okay, forget it. Like I'm gonna, use some other service instead. So, collecting information as you need it is sort of a best practice. And one way of doing that is to have a minimal sign-up process and then use edit profile policies to collect additional information as it's needed. And then some of the performance tips that we just talked about in terms of minifying, embedding CSS, hosting it on a CDN, avoiding large images. We have some time here for questions. I think the next session is not in here for another 10, 15 minutes. We do have swag if you have a really great question. And go ahead.
Sorry, probably a great question. So on the simplify the sign-up process, that's one of the pain points with our customer. And we've got the UX guys coming in making a lot of demands on the profile provider. So one of the things that we come up with, and I don't necessarily agree, but at the moment we're forced, we've got the anchor tag and VC's chucking all the content in there. It's going to chuck two password fields coming out. And for some reason that's a real pain with our UX guys. They only want to see one password field, not the confirmation password field. Now is that some of the low-level stuff that you're planning to get us access or ability to customer, or are you making the decision that no, you should always confirm your password?
So the question was, during the sign-up process, there is a password field and then there's also a confirm password field. And what are you giving us in terms of being able to customize that? So today I do not believe there is any way to change that.
I think using custom policies, you can remove the re-enter password field. But in my opinion, we would recommend you not to do that.
Yeah. Completely understand that. Same with email verification, right? So we're saying to the customer, no, this is best practice.
Yeah.
But they're like, no, it's a barrier to conversion.
Yeah.
So they're getting rid of email verification.
Yeah.
Now they want to get rid of password confirmation.
Yeah.
Like I said, through the custom pods, I can take off the read.
Yeah, you can.
Instead.
Yeah, we can chat offline. I can show you how to do that as well. Yeah.
That was a great question. So you should come up after and grab some swag here. Any other questions?
One more of a comment actually on your MSA sign-in that you showed. Something we've done for an insurance company who generally have people, they buy a policy and then 12 months later they'll come back and they'll renew their policy, but there's no traffic in the meantime unless they have an accident or something happen. So one of the things that they were concerned about is, if they've signed up for Facebook, are they going to remember they've signed up for Facebook?
Yeah.
Or are they going to remember they've actually signed up before? Yeah, at all, because there are other ways of buying the policy. So we implemented something like that, which takes the username, does a discovery on the directory to see, what if they've signed up before, and then show things appropriately. And although it's not quite a production yet, they really like that. It's quite a slick way of just helping the user out. They don't have to make any decision when they sign up, so Facebook or a password.
So I think the question is about account linking. So you're saying that the first.
No, so it's not. It's just a comment on the. So not really a question at all.
Okay.
It's just a comment on your thing you said about sign up, the MSA sign up.
So it sounds like you have it working then. You basically are accepting a username, and then based on, hey, this email looks like they used Facebook last time to sign in. And so then showing them in the next orchestration step, showing them the sign-in options of what they previously used. Yeah, that's a great, it's a great best practice. I mean, I think that's the sort of thing that we would potentially want to do in the built-in policy that we would make available that models after the MSA behavior.
From a user experience point of view, the user can't remember that way. It doesn't matter. They just put in their email address, and we have the information, so we make the rest of the decision for them.
Yeah, there is other services that I've seen on the web that will take any of the social providers and trust all of them. So basically, if you sign in with Facebook and then the next time you sign in with Google+, it'll just look at the email claim coming back from the identity provider and go, if this email matches this email, then sure, let them in, regardless of whether they signed up with that identity or not. There is a security issue with that, and that is, imagine that you have in the past validated some email, but since then that domain maybe expired and changed hands to some other domain owner, if it was a custom domain. And then now somebody else owns that email address and then is using essentially a service that they've signed up for and then getting access to all the account information, which is supposed to be secured using one service. I think there would be less concern if the service that they're signing in with is the authority for the email. So an example would be if it's a Gmail address and they're signing in via Google, then Google is the authority for Gmail, the Gmail email address itself. And so the claims that they come back with, I would be more inclined to trust and say, yes, they must have control of this email address because it's a Gmail address and they just signed in with Google.
I think you're concerned about domains expiring and moving on to other people. It's the same for any of it, though. With your account, you can use an email address or whether you just have one option. If somebody's using a custom domain and they let it expire,
Yeah.
it will move to somebody else. There is a risk.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, makes sense. Another great comment. You should grab some swag. Anybody else? Otherwise, I think we're going to wrap up here. And there is a talk session from 12 to 1, so you can come find Vinu or myself if you have specific questions about any of these demos here. We do have some blog posts that we plan to post talking about some of these, and we have some, documentation and samples and whatnot that will basically describe step by step how to achieve some of these experiences. But if you want to get rolling on this today, come find us at 12. Thanks a lot.
Do you have another question?
Yeah, absolutely.
So going back to the email verification, you can run the content of the email. Can you also change the sender address?
We've been doing that. You want to speak to that?
Yeah, sure. There is a way to do it, but it's a manual process and it takes quite some time for us to do it internally. So we've been doing it only for launch partners as of now, but somewhere along the line we will expose that feature as well. Any-
All right. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, if you any feedback on this section. that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Give us feedback. We'll, take your feedback and we'll keep improving the content that we deliver to you guys.